This is one of the biggest and most expensive driving simulator in the world, and I'm going to drive it. I am in Dallara, and this simulator is used to design and develop the real racing car, and it was also used by Haas Formula 1. What does it mean to drive a driving simulator worth million euros? What does it feel like? How hard it is? But especially, what's the difference between this one and the one in your house? These are all questions I'll be answering in this video. If you remember, I shot an entire documentary where I show you all the secrets of Dallara Automobili, but in that video I didn't talk enough about the driving simulator. Why? Because this is the video where I talk about that. So there we are. The Dallara Driving Simulator. So this is a custom simulator that has been made for Dallara, and we're talking about only to build it 4 to 5 million euros, and I'm not putting into account all the development that they did in this year. This is not commercially available, and like this one, there are only 3 in the world. 2 are owned by Dallara, one is here and one is in Indianapolis. Until last year, the other one was used by Ferrari Formula 1 for the Formula 1 development. So the question is, what is it used for? There are many uses of this simulator. First of all, Dallara use it to develop the cars that don't exist yet. So they drive cars that don't exist. Yeah, because when Dallara creates a new car, they start from the design, they start from project, they start from scratch. And at that time, the car doesn't exist yet. So they test the embryo of that car on the simulator to see which solutions will be better. Talking about suspensions, engine, tires, and everything. So they use the simulator to help the developers of the car. Then, once the car is ready, once the car starts to exist in the real world, they use the simulator to develop the setup of that car. And all of this is done by professional drivers, because nobody like a professional driver knows how the car has to be set up and developed. Another thing they use the simulator for is they rent it, for example, to racing teams, to racing drivers who wants to develop the driver skills, or they want to develop the setup like Formula 2, Formula 3, GT, LMS. So they come here, they rent the simulator for one day and they train. And it was also used by Haas Formula 1. They used it until last year. Then they went to Maranello to use the twin of this one who was used by Ferrari. So Ferrari changed the simulator and the old one is now used by Haas Formula 1, which is like this one exactly. And what did they do? They didn't only train the drivers, but they came here every racing weekend to replicate the conditions that they had on track, on the real actual track, and help the real racing team to modify the setup for each session. So after FP1, the virtual driver comes here, he drives, he says, okay, try this, try that. They simulate everything and they send all the data to the real racing team. Talking about the software, the graphics, only the graphics are from the Pro version of Assetto Corsa, while the physics of the car has been totally designed and developed from scratch from Dallara. Everything, tires, suspensions, aerodynamics, everything. As you can see, we have that kind of cage where the simulator is put in, which is suspended on these 6 actuators, which replicate the movement of the car. And all the signals and data and stuff are transferred via those cables down there. It is reinforced with this carbon structure, and everything has been lightened in order to perform better. How do we get in there, you may say? We have this stair down here, which we climb to get inside the simulator. Oh, che figata. Wow. So we are inside the simulator. As you can see behind me, there is the screen, which is this 180 degrees. It's not a monitor, it's like a fabric, super delicate. They told us not to touch it, we might break it. And the image is projected by those 3 projectors behind. One of the coolest things you can see here is that we have the real cockpit of the car inside. So that means that according to which car they will be driving on the simulator, they literally change the cockpit. They remove it and put a different one. So if a Formula 2 racing team will come here, they will put the Formula 2 cockpit inside the simulator. And here we have the Cadillac cockpit, which is the LMDH that I showed you in the documentary, which is the car that is going to be racing this year in Daytona. And I will be driving that car on the simulator. So a new car that still hasn't raced yet. I will be driving it for the first time here today. So I have the racing suit. I will also be using the helmet. And you may say, why? Just because you want to look cool? No, for safety reasons, because you're on a moving platform, so you need the helmet. And the racing suit is because I will be sweating a lot. And racing shoes, because otherwise I would not be able to use properly the pedals. So as you can see, they've put the real car inside the simulator, obviously only the cockpit. So when the driver comes here to train, he doesn't only simulate the virtual car, but he also sits in the real car. Wow. Ok, va bene, va bene. Mamma mia! I don't know how to describe how it feels to stay inside. Whoa, it's lifting. Ok, siamo pronti. Whoa! Woo! Whoa! Oh, vabbè. Mamma mia! Che roba incredibile! Vediamo dove si frena qua in curva 1. Ok. Lungo la prima curva. Che roba assurda, sembra di stare in macchina. L'ho persa subito nel ghiaione. Ok, se freno troppo blocca dietro. Wow, come salta! Mamma mia, mi sono staccato dalla sedia. Oh, porca vacca. Minchia raga. Ok, non devo prendere quei dossi. Ok, stop. Mamma mia. Come guidare una macchina vera. Almeno qua non fai danni. Quando mi ha detto 38 basso mi volevo nascondere.
Com'è andata?
Male?
No, bene. Al sim mi sembra che non hai fatto una piega.
Sì, però siamo ancora.
Quello è quello del meno, ti ho detto che c'è da abituarsi a un po' troppe cose tutte
No,
insieme.
ma in
Un po' il
realtà
simulatore, un po' la macchina.
il simulatore non è un problema abituarsi, è proprio la macchina, perché quando ero salito sul GT4 la prima volta mi sembrava di volare e giravo 8 secondi più piano e gli dico aspetta. E mi hanno detto, vedi il pedale del freno, devi proprio schiacciarlo come se ti stessi, cioè se lo odiassi quel pedale.
Qui siamo a un livello ancora oltre di questo.
È diverso perché col GT4 tu devi schiacciare al 100% e portare fino a centro curva, che tanto fa tutto.
Perché qui fa tutto l'ABS.
Qua invece no.
È l'opposto, qui devi, nel senso, subito hai l'aerodinamica che non ti fa bloccare le gomme.
Sì.
E la devi sfruttare il più possibile,
Ok.
cioè portare più pressione subito e poi deve scendere proprio a triangolo velocemente.
Devi fare proprio pam e poi rilasciarlo.
Sì, ma non troppo veloce, cioè non
Rilasciarlo.
troppo presto, perché
Ok.
sennò non la freni.
Ok.
potenza, sai che lì
Non ho mandato potenza al motore, per quello andavo piano.
quando poi la porti poi troppo lunga.
Se lo confronti col mio grafico dell'Euro NASCAR, è uguale la frenata come la sto facendo io. Che facciamo quel picco lì e poi la rilasciamo subito e la teniamo.
Ma questo è positivo, vuol dire che il simulatore lo senti come una macchina.
Sì. Sto facendo quello che ho sempre fatto, solo che non va bene con questa macchina.
È da adattarsi a una macchina diversa.
Sì.
È proprio il discorso velocità, alta velocità.
Sì.
Perché più la velocità è alta, più la downforce aerodinamica non ti fa bloccare. Quindi è lì che gli devi dare la frenata più che puoi. Veramente più che puoi.
Now we move to Sebring. Now I have the reference of a real driver who tested this car here. I have only 20 laps, so let's see what I can do. Ok. Ecco, tipo qua ho dato 100% in frenata e ho bloccato.
Sì, eri a bassa velocità. Più la velocità è bassa, più si assomigliano le macchine.
Do troppo freno qua, per questo si alleggerisce dietro.
Diamo un'occhiata ai dati. Chiudi il giro e diamo un'occhiata ai dati.
Perché continua a bloccare?
Ma la ripartizione non è male, ma neanche la frenata, devo dirti, non è male. In curva 17 prima hai portato dentro troppa velocità, cioè va stoppata un po' di più all'inizio a ruote dritte.
Non lo so, il problema è che continua a bloccare in ingresso, quando sto entrando dentro la curva proprio. Tipo qua non capisco perché ho bloccato, capisci?
Ok, stop.
Ma veramente 1,48 il riferimento?
Sì, questo riferimento è vero.
Ditemi solo cos'è che devo fare per tirare giù tutti quei secondi, cioè cos'è che sto sbagliando di grosso?
Fondamentalmente i secondi li stai perdendo in uscita, poi in accelerazione perché parti da velocità troppo basse, ma il problema è tutto legato ancora al freno. Stopparla di più all'inizio a ruote dritte e andare via via più gentile.
Sì, chiaro. Va bene, io ci sono, quando volete partiamo.
Ok, abbiamo finito.
Distrutto. Hello. Did you notice that I never drove a prototype car in my life? It's totally different than anything. Different from NASCAR, different from Formula car. Totally different. Dov'è che perdo tutto?
Un pochino dappertutto, piano piano. Però guarda qua, questa è la curva 1 e lì sono due fattori, la conoscenza della pista e della macchina.
Sì.
Perché comunque in ogni caso la traiettoria è importante, ma soprattutto è la potenzialità della macchina. Cioè, magari tu pensi che sei arrivato al limite, che guidi la macchina al limite, perché magari ha un certo comportamento, ma quel comportamento può essere dettato dal fatto che non hai la macchina nel posto giusto in pista e soprattutto non la conosci ancora a fondo. Quindi il modo in cui freni, il modo in cui curvi e quando dai acceleratore. Però ti stai avvicinando, cioè nelle curve lente, quindi nel misto, diciamo, in questa zona qua che più o meno hai bisogno di intuito, la macchina la metti nei posti giusti, però non conoscendo la macchina non la sfrutti al 100%.
Cioè per tutta la vita ho guidato Formula e GT, per cui quando ero ad esempio andato a provare il simulatore di Trident, che c'era la Formula 3, lì ho girato 1/10 dal loro pilota. Capisci? Cioè, perché ho l'idea di come si guida un Formula. Qui è proprio un'altra cosa.
Prima che è un'altra cosa ancora. Cioè, questa ha un approccio di Formula per le frenate, però comunque è una macchina con il 20-30% di peso in più.
Sì.
E quindi in un certo senso va combinata come un GT, però non hai i controlli del GT, non ha l'ABS.
Quindi la macchina insieme a una pista che è veramente difficile, sai, le due cose mixate insieme,
Sì, Sebring è
crea
stronza.
questa differenza. Vabbè.
Bene? No, è fantastico. So, how was it? Super bad. I mean, the problem is that I just had the chance to do 15 laps because after that we had to keep shooting the documentary around the factory, so there was no time. For a driver like me that comes from NASCAR, driving a LMDH with that downforce, which is much heavier than Formula One, I needed more time to get used to it. However, let's talk about the simulator. Wow. Driving all dressed inside the cockpit with all that screen around, that was the most immersive simulator I've ever driven. Now, I thought that the forces I would experience on that were much stronger, but instead it was not that hard physically. I mean, it was exhausting, yes, but the forces were not that hard. And basically that's because no simulator in the world can replicate the G-forces of real life. It's physically impossible for now. So what they do, they just replicate the movements of the car, the bumps, and the weight transfers. And I never thought about that, but for example, the new Ferrari Formula One simulator, it's much smaller than that. So instead of being a big spider, it's kind of like a small spider. So the goal of a moving simulator is to make the driver feel the movements of the car. Now, differences between Dallara simulator and homemade simulator. I'll tell you one crazy thing. If you think that the home simulator is just a game, while only simulator like that is real driving, wrong. I mean, if we talk about engineering, aerodynamics, data, there's a huge difference. But if we talk about driving feelings, they are really similar. Now, you probably don't know that, but I've been driving simulators since 2006. 18 years that I drive everything. I've been racing in real life for 7 years. More than 120 races, so many different cars. So now I think I can do a comparison between virtual and real. I'll make a video about that, where I compare the top 4 simulators that I know. Assetto Corsa Competizione, iRacing, R-Factor 2. Spoiler, iRacing is the worst simulator of all. Especially the tire model has nothing to do with real life, while the best in my honest opinion is R-Factor 2. Now, if you take a simulator like R-Factor 2 and compare it to the real life, it's almost the same. And if you take the Dallara simulator and compare it to real life, it's almost the same. That means that anybody at home can have a super realistic simulator. So the question is, why spending 4 million euros to build a simulator like that if with 10,000 euros cockpit and 200 euros software you can simulate reality? Because the purpose of the Dallara simulator is not train drivers, even if they do it, but it's to develop the engineering of real cars, to develop setups. So if talking about the driving feelings and the driving behavior of the car that you feel, a homemade simulator is almost the same. If we talk about the whole engineering process, there's a big difference. For example, talking about the physics complexity. In a simulator like that, the physics of the car is simulated at a much deeper and more complex level. Engineers can collect many data about everything, the aerodynamics, mechanics, suspensions, tires. While you're driving, you probably don't realize that, because the driving feeling is almost the same. But below that, the engineer, analyzing those data, he sees the difference. There's a huge difference about the development. Talking about me, every evening that I drive R-Factor 2, I'm only interested in simulating the driving, the feelings. I don't care about the aerodynamic flow of that particular spoiler. There, instead, that's what they do. Then we have the teamwork. If you want to bring the whole crew of a Formula One team in the same place to simulate a racing weekend, you need a big infrastructure, hardware, data flow, something that you don't need at home. Then there is the simulations. When you're simulating at home, you just press play and drive. And the only thing you want to simulate is the behavior of the car. There, in complex simulators like in Formula One, they want to run automatic simulations. Maybe they create hundreds of instances of the same car with different setups and run simulations to see how it behaves. And then there is the hardware. And I'm not talking about the steering wheel and the pedals, because nowadays anybody with enough budget can buy the best. No, I'm talking about all the rest. If you build a cockpit for Le Mans and you want the driver to test it to see if every switch is properly placed, how it feels with that, you need to actually build it. And that's all. So nowadays, home simulators, not all of them, have reached a realism which is truly comparable with real life. Talking about the driving feelings. What's missing, obviously, is all the part of engineering development, which is the reason why a company like Dallara needed to build such a big and expensive simulator. Thanks Dallara for inviting me. I think I should come back to improve my drive with the LMDH whenever you want.